Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. George Lazenby, possibly the only big-screen Bond actor with the dubious honour of having played James Bond more times outside the official film series than in it. While it's certainly not unusual for Bond actors to assume their 007 personas for tie-in commercials, video games, the occasional skit, or even a full-blown and official feature here and there, Lazenby is a particularly interesting case, given that he of course only appeared in a single main series Bond adventure, and many have wondered what he'd have been like in the part had he been given the opportunity to do more. Well, in and amongst his non-Majesty Secret Service projects, including a fun turn on a Canadian sketch show and a cameo behind the wheel of the DB5 in a Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV movie.
Shaken, but not stirred.
One of the most interesting insights into what Lazenby's Bond could have become is in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents called Diamonds Aren't Forever. Now, I know what you're thinking. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, that was a TV show from the 50s and 60s, wasn't it? Well, unless you're under a certain age, obviously, and then you're probably wondering what an Alfred Hitchcock even is. And if you're under an even more certain age, you might even be wondering what a television show even is. Well, yes, Alfred Hitchcock Presents was an anthology mystery, sometimes comedy series featuring half-hour suspenseful stories that viewers could enjoy from their own living rooms. Alfred Hitchcock himself directed several episodes, but was perhaps more known for his droll intros and outros.
Exercise, that's it. I think I'll take up sports again. I'm quite an athlete, you know. I particularly excel in chess, falconry, wife-beating, that sort of thing.
Hitchcock's name was, of course, synonymous with being a master of suspense, and the 50s arguably gave the world some of the director's most revered films, including Rear Window, Strangers on a Train, and North by Northwest. Well, Alfred Hitchcock died in 1980, so what better time than 1985 to revive the man's TV show? Now, due to lack of availability, I can't say that I've seen much of the 80s revival of the show, but I certainly know my Hitchcock. I'm a massive Hitchcock fan, seen most episodes of his 50s show, suspense was totally my thing, I could talk for hours on Hitchcock movies alone. But we keep this on the down low. If my Bond box set sees me cheating on it again with the Alfred Hitchcock box set, then I'll be kicked out for good. It's not what it looks like, I swear. So the prospect of George Lazenby appearing in a Bond-themed episode of anything bearing the name Alfred Hitchcock is enough to get me mopping excitement perspiration from my brow. Airing in April of 1989, just a couple of months before Timothy Dalton's second Bond adventure premiered to the world, how does Lazenby fare in a Bond-like role 2 decades after his official Bond film? Well, thanks to some good Samaritan uploading the episode to YouTube, link below, we can actually find out. As the show starts, well, true to its name, this episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents is indeed presented by Alfred Hitchcock. But how is this possible, I hear you ask, when Alfred Hitchcock died 9 years before the broadcast of this episode? Well, this is obviously a Bond-influenced episode, so we can assume that Mr. Hitchcock was familiar with the death-defying tricks of Baron Samedi. Now, that would be an opening twist. But rather, this revival series merely colorizes those segments from the 50s and 60s episodes. But the thing is that in the 50s and 60s, the intros and outros for these things would often refer to elements of the particular story of that week, and they would even refer to sponsors and the like, so how the heck do they make them relevant for new stories in a new era? Well, they don't. I guess they just plucked out the ones that most tenuously linked to the theme of the episodes in question and cut around any references that Hitchcock might have made to sponsors and the like. In this instance, I guess Hitchcock is talking a border crossing because spies travel a lot? The whole thing is over really quickly, and the ending is so clearly cut off without a punchline that it makes the whole endeavour seem really quite pointless.
I also have a very lucrative sideline. I retouch passport photographs for men.
That's a joke? Okay. Though this is a cash-in on the Alfred Hitchcock name, and it would feel quite weird for him to not have any kind of physical presence at all in the episodes, but you know what, maybe this was just a really poor adaptation of one of his segments, and maybe it worked better in other episodes. Anyway, into the episode proper, which begins in suitably Bondian fashion, in theory at least, with a fight aboard a plane, which crashes off screen.
Your reputation as super spy is well earned. Even though defeated, you taking me to hell with you!
Afraid not. Cheerio.
We linger, loving over lunch.
What the hell did I just watch? So obviously they're on a TV budget in the 80s, so I'm not expecting exemplary special effects, but Jesus, this feels so low budget. The stock aeroplane footage, the dodgy voiceover, the off-screen explosion, the knockoff Shirley Bassey theme.
Then he broke my heart with a single punch. My guy's a spy.
But hey, George is in a tux, he's parachuting in with Union Jack, and he looks really good. Like, obviously his hair is greying, and he's an older man than he was in 1969, but to say that this is 20 years later, he's looking really dapper and quite at home in that tux. Though clearly, this nearby angry woodcutter is significantly less pleased to see Lazenby than I am.
Oh, I hate it when dapper Australians parachute in on my turf.
Turns out this place is a hotel, and our hero is checking in under the name of...
My name is James.
Which is a cute gag, and hey, this receptionist lady does a good job of selling the perks of the place.
An excellent bar facility, should you care to get yourself completely whaled.
Now, I've heard an awful lot of euphemisms for getting drunk in my time, but getting completely whaled is not one that I have come across before. And where does that saying even come from? I mean, it's not as if you take a sip of alcohol and then you turn into a... Huh? Well, I'll be damned. Now, at this point, George slinks out of the story for a little while as we segue into said hotel bar to meet with two of the most wooden actors I've ever seen.
What if I get another attack?
You won't.
I couldn't stand it if it happened again.
Mickey, it never happened.
I guess you're right.
I've definitely described Lazenby's performance in Majesty's Secret Service as wooden in the past, but watching these two actors performing this scene, my god, I take it back. I've experienced a whole new level of wood watching these two. I should have phrased that differently. So this is Rachel and Mickey, and for some reason they're therapist and patient respectively, and have come to spend some time at this hotel. We're also introduced to the bartender here, who decides to have a crazy off with Mickey for no reason.
I used to black out, you know. Oh, yeah, and when I'd wake up, there'd be blood everywhere and dead people.
Say, you interested in stuffed birds?
I'm not just talking once or twice, either.
Stuffed them myself.
I mean, you can't blame me for thinking I was a murderer.
Just last week I ran down a rooster, but Mrs. Pickett said it wasn't right to stuff him.
I mean, I'd pass out and bang, Stiff City.
And the winner of the Norman Bates wannabe contest is... In this section, we're also introduced to aspiring actress Honey and wildlife producer A.C. Boone. They apparently met on the journey to the hotel, and Honey is trying to put the moves on Boone because she mistakenly believes that he works in porn films, and she wants a job, as you do, but he's not being receptive for her because he's there for other reasons, like hanging himself.
Would you like to register, miss?
Yes, something close to Mr. Boone, if that's okay.
Sure, whatever. It's your room.
So each of these guests have their own thing going on and reasons for being there, and Lazenby is kind of caught in the middle of it, as his Mission Impossible style briefing explains.
The following are mission instructions for Mr. James. One or more of your fellow guests is a Soviet agent. Like you, they have been sent to retrieve the Golden Egret of Bishwara, which is hidden somewhere in your hotel. Unless you recover the statue, the vital state of Bishwara may fall to Soviet domination.
Okay, so this is kind of find the Maltese Falcon before the Russians do. Sounds like a simple enough spy plot? Rather less simple are the various hijinks of the other guests. There's one instance where Honey, who can't find her contact lenses, makes her way into what she thinks is Mr. Boone's room, but it's actually Mickey's room, and hilarity ensues as she gets into the shower with him while fully clothed, and those must be some bad eyes that she has if she can genuinely mistake these two men, but okay, whatever, I guess that this is Scooby-Doo level optometry rules. My contacts, I can't see a thing if I don't find my contacts. Mickey's psychiatrist Rachel walks in on them both, but Mickey is actually in love with Rachel, so that's embarrassing for him before Rachel hears a thud coming from Mr. Boone's room, and it turns out that he's trying to kill himself because...
Well, it's women. They terrify me.
Jeez, okay, I get it. This is Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but does every guy in this, apart from Lazenby, need to be some Norman Bates ripoff? Meanwhile, outside, the bartender is using his break to perv on the other guests and casually scowl at his sickles, so nothing sinister going on here, but credit to the guy's work ethic. He does get back in time to serve Lazenby his first drink of the evening.
Martini.
Not stirred.
All right.
So I actually think that that moment's really cute, but it's the overdubbing that lets it down. It's very clunky, and my guess would be that they filmed it without the dialogue, and then they edited it together and no one knew what the hell was going on, but I don't think it plays as nice, and I think that if they'd have left that little scene without the dialogue, it would have been a nice little fan nod instead of signposting it too much. But hey, speaking of signposting, Boone appears and calls Lazenby's attention to a stuffed bird on the wall. Write that down, folks, it's coming back later. Lazenby continues his investigation for the Golden Egret of Bishwara by asking the receptionist, Mrs. Pickett, if she's seen such a thing as a Golden Egret of Bishwara, and I love that they had to send a spy along to just ask if anyone had handed anything in at the Lost and Found hotel, but this exchange does prompt probably my favourite moment of the whole show.
I'll go take a look in the safe.
Oh, might we meet in your office, say, in 5 minutes?
Of course.
Guess I haven't lost it.
You know, it just wouldn't be Lazenby Bond unless he had at least one moment where he broke the fourth wall. It's saying a lot that my favourite moments in this so far are just the bits where Lazenby is doing something cool and Bondian, because the plot is very messy and all the other characters in this hotel are super annoying, but because Lazenby and the receptionist agreed to an arbitrary 5-minute break before meeting again, the old lady is murdered by someone with a sickle. Mickey wakes up with blood on his hands and follows the trail from outside his room to where Mrs. Pickett's body is before running in and alerting the other guys, who are all in the bar now.
Help! It's Mrs. Pickett! The old lady's dead. She's been murdered with a scythe.
A what?
A scythe! You know, it's a tool with a short handle and a big semicircular blade.
That's not a scythe. A scythe is a reaping implement with a very long blade.
That's right. Sort of like a crooked pole with two handles sticking out at right angles.
Yes, and the blade's only slightly curved. It's not semicircular.
What you're describing is a sickle.
The point is, she's been murdered.
Okay, I do have to confess, I do kind of really like this whole exchange, and it feels very Hitchcockian in its sense of humour. Hitchcock's comedy was very dark, and the idea that people are quibbling over the terminology regarding how they're going to refer to a murder weapon while someone has been murdered feels quite fitting. Meanwhile, the scythe-wielding bartender is caught trying to sneak off before giving us the best reaction to hearing that someone has been murdered ever.
She's been murdered.
Crikey!
Hello, Felix. Get over here right away.
What's up?
The girl's dead.
Crikey!
Things become kind of Agatha Christie drawing room kind of stuff from here on, with all the characters assembled and Lazenby providing the sleuth role, like a handsome Aussie Poirot, and I admit that this is probably my favourite chunk of the thing as everyone comes forward with their say. It's perfectly obvious that it's the bartender who committed the crime, and I don't think that this is even supposed to be a mystery as such. It's more about the absurdity of the characters and the funny lines.
I know who the killer is.
Can you tell us?
Yes.
We're waiting.
Oh, you mean now? Oh, sorry. The killer is that cheap little slut over there.
Who you calling cheap, buddy?
Not you. I was pointing at Honey.
However, there is of course the mystery of who exactly in this hotel is the Soviet agent after the Golden Egret of Bishwara. Sure, the bartender is more likely the murderer, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the spy too. I think that Lazenby does a really good handsome Miss Marple bit here, by the way, running through all of the different characters' motives, and I think that in concept, the idea of a James Bond character being entangled in a drawing room murder mystery like this is a good one. I just don't think that the idea is executed here to its full potential, and that's down to the fact that this was a half-hour show, they clearly had a very limited budget, and much of the time is spent setting up these other characters at the hotel so that we don't get as much of Lazenby as I think we should. Anyway, nothing like a murder mystery to really tire oneself out. All of the characters get bored of Lazenby Columboing everyone, and they head off to bed. Mr. Boone hooks up with the psychiatrist Rachel while the bartender threatens Honey with the sickle, prompting Lazenby to leap into action, prompting a fight scene that includes a very funky For Your Eyes Only style music track.
I've been looking forward to this. Don't throw that! Oh. They should let you out more often.
Oh.
What it says is wasting good furniture.
This is another highlight of the episode for me. Lazenby taking on the bartender and the gardener, throwing some punches, making some quips.
Shocking.
Positively shocking.
Next morning, Boone and Rachel head off to observe the mating season of the three-toed sloth. No, really, they do, while Lazenby wraps things up for us.
Here I thought I was a murderer, and it turns out to have been Barney all along. I still can't figure out why he killed Mrs. Pickett.
Well, both Barney and Mrs. Pickett were imposters. Rogue agents on the trail of the statue. They killed the real owner, gardener, and bartender, and took over. The statue, I assume, is long gone, and the courier has likely traced it elsewhere.
Not sure if that works exactly, because if all of the hotel staff were imposters, then why did the bartender kill the receptionist? Unless were they all imposters but just not on the same side? How many different factions are at war here? But if that's not confusing enough for you, Lazenby deduces that the Golden Egret of Bishwara was hidden inside the taxidermied bird that Boone had innocuously pointed out earlier, and it turns out that Mickey is the secret agent out to retrieve the statue.
I assume you're the courier.
Naturally.
And the blackouts and murders.
The blackouts were a fraud. The murders were very real.
Oh, okay, so was it Mickey that killed the receptionist? But if it was him that intentionally killed her, why was he waking up looking startled at the blood on his hands earlier? No one else was around. Who was he performing to? Who was he trying to kid? Anyway, the day is saved by Honey, who is also a secret agent undercover, but then that begs the question that why was she so intent on charming Mr. Boone into kickstarting her pornography career? Or was that just a ruse to get close to him because she thought he might be the secret agent? Or is this twist all just to facilitate the idea that we need to end with Lazenby and a Bond girl? Well, yes, that's exactly it, except there's still one more twist to come, as it turns out the bad guy that Lazenby was fighting on the plane at the start, who we never actually saw, turns up, prompting the end of the story with quite possibly the worst gun barrel sequence since Quantum of Solace.
Oh, James, beautiful.
HQ doesn't know a thing about them. We could retire from the game and live excessively ever after.
Is that all you care about? Wealth, material gain, comfort?
Not at all. I mean, there are far more important things. After all, diamonds aren't forever.
It takes more than little plane crash to discourage me. But this is end of line for you, Mr. James.
Colorized Hitchcock appears to wrap things up for us as we head to the credits to see that Lazenby, very disappointingly, was actually playing a character called James Grant this whole time. I'd have sooner they just left it ambiguous, but they probably felt like they needed to clarify Lazenby wasn't actually playing James Bond to put those pesky MGM lawyers off the scent. I tell you, Michael, we're gonna make a fortune suing these people. Universal won't know what hit him. I say we go after Hitchcock himself. I say we sue that bastard into the ground. What do you mean he's already in the ground? He can't be. I just saw him on TV. The credits are literally just rolling on the Oh, hang on a minute. James Grant. Oh, sorry, Michael. It's false alarm. Did Kevin McClory have anything to do with this? So there we go, Diamonds Aren't Forever, starring George Lazenby as James Grant. This thing is such an oddity. I think most Bond fans would get a kick out of seeing Lazenby tuxing up to give us a light-hearted reprisal of his incarnation of the character, and all of the scenes with him in are undoubtedly the best, and there are a few funny moments here and there, but ultimately the time restrictions on this thing are just much too tight to deliver a satisfying murder mystery with a Bondian twist, which is clearly the vibe that they're going for. It's a joy to see Lazenby, but the rest of the cast range from wooden to competent, and there are some really confusing twists for twist's sake in here. It's an interesting curio for Bond fans and nothing more, but it's of course worth watching for Lazenby himself and imagining what further Bond films might have been like with him had he stuck around in the part for another decade or so. He certainly looks the role, and while his hair is grey and he's obviously more mature man, he pulls the role off remarkably well in this. Worth watching from that aspect, just don't go into it expecting much in the way of suspense or mystery. It's very much a farcical comedy kind of episode with George Lazenby's Bond parachuted into the middle of it. If you have seen it, please do let me know your thoughts on it in the comments section below. Also, please do consider subscribing to this channel so you can stay up to date on future video uploads, and also below are links to my various social media pages. You can find my Facebook page, my Twitter page, and my Patreon page for those of you who want to go one extra step in supporting this channel. Until next time, Bond fans, so long for now. Crikey!